I am using my Leica wrong. And no, this is no clickbait, but I am in fact really using my Leica the wrong way, and maybe you are too without even knowing it. But take a look here, because here I am actually doing it wrong. And here I do it again, and here I am also using it the wrong way. So, did you see it? But first, in order to explain to you what I am doing wrong here, I think it makes sense to take a step back and talk about how the Leica system or the rangefinder system in general actually works and how it is supposed to be used. If we take a look at SLR cameras first, the whole construction is rather simple and self-explanatory. You simply take your camera, put it to your eye, and what you see is what you get. With SLR cameras we have mirrors and a prism built in, which means that the image we get to see through the viewfinder is exactly what the camera, what the lens is seeing. So with an SLR camera you will get an exact view of the world through the camera itself. The Leica M system or rangefinder systems in general work a bit differently, because we don't have any mirrors and we don't have a prism built in, which means that the little viewfinder we have here is pretty much simply a hole in the camera. We don't get to see the image the lens is seeing, but all we have is an estimation with the magnification of the viewfinder of what the lens might be seeing. And as an indicator we have these frame lines that are kind of estimating, according to the focal length of the lens we have, how the frame could be looking like. Well, this might be a little bit confusing at first, and maybe you even think that a rangefinder camera doesn't sound too useful if it's not really showing us what we are getting, and that maybe the rangefinder camera sounds a bit inferior to something like the SLR, since the execution is more precise and the framing is more precise with a SLR camera, and you are definitely correct to a certain extent. But the strength of the rangefinder system and the Leica M system in specific is in fact that we don't get to see the exact image that we are shooting, but that we are getting to see a little bit more. So with the rangefinder camera we get to see more context variables surrounding our framing, which might help us to kind of foresee and take into account when subjects are maybe moving in and out of the frame, which is something that is not possible with a SLR camera. And the way a rangefinder is actually meant to be used is this way here. So you are shooting with both eyes open while you see the kind of surrounding elements with your left eye, and you get to see an almost like ghost-like image of the frame lines of your camera with your right eye on top of that. And yes, you can insert the Joel Meyerowitz meme here, which is very funny but also kind of true.
The Leica has the window here, not here. But when you put it with your eye, you see this.
So you are using the camera with both eyes, which has the big advantage that there is no blackout when shooting, but you get to see everything around you non-stop, because with a SLR camera, because we have the mirror slab, there will be short blackouts where you don't get to see like a moment in between. So this is one of the major benefits of a rangefinder system, that there is no interruption between you and the world, so to speak. All this sounds really great in theory, but the Leica M system actually faces one major problem, which involuntarily leads some people to using it wrong, including me, which is eye dominance.
And certainly one-eyed is what a camera does, that's why it's so two-dimensional. But you are binocular.
Because all this concept of, seeing the world simultaneously as seeing the frame lines with your right eye does only work if your right eye is actually kind of strong or dominant enough to be able to actually see frame lines by having the other eye open as well. And that most likely is the case for people who are right eye dominant. By using this camera I actually found out that I am in fact left eye dominant, which means that my preferred way of using a camera is like this, because I have no troubles of seeing the frame lines, while I really don't get to see anything once I put the camera to my eye like this. I get to see what my left eye is seeing, so I get to see you and I get to see stuff around me, but I don't really get to see a projection of the frame lines at the same time as the things that my left dominant eye is seeing, which means that using the camera like this is pretty much unusable for me, and I get to see the frame lines a little bit when I try to close this eye and squint, which is very exhausting and not as easy for me. Yeah, but this is also part of a self-experiment I did, because some weeks ago I wasn't even capable of closing this eye fully, but more on that a little bit later. In case you are wondering which one your dominant eye is, there's actually a rather easy trick to find out. And all you will need is just your two hands and some sort of object in the distance. It can, for example, be a picture frame or maybe a clock in your house. And all you have to do is to form some sort of triangle with your hands and put your arms like an arm length away, like this, and try to kind of frame your object within the triangle you have made with your hands. And then you simply kind of close one eye and see what happens. So if the object is still within the frame of the triangle, it means that the eye that is still open is in fact your dominant eye. And if the object is not in the same spot as it was before in your triangle, but if it's kind of jumping, it means that the eye that is still open is your passive eye. So in case you didn't notice anything while shooting, which of course is a good thing, this might be your time to find out if you're left or right eye dominant, or maybe if you are even flexible and capable of seeing everything the same with both eyes. Well, now that I know that I'm left eye dominant and that I have been using my Leica wrong, I was of course very curious to see if there's anything that I can do to change that. So I started a little self-experiment over the course of the last 3 months in order to see if I can strengthen my right ear and maybe even change my eye dominance in order to use my Leica the correct way. But just as a little disclaimer, this is no scientific test, this is just my own personal experience, so this might differ and be different for everybody who might try the same. So what I basically did to practice my right eye was to consciously use only my right eye for specific tasks. So for example, when watching a movie, when being on my phone, I consciously tried to close my left eye and only do it with my right eye. So, I hope that this one would be a little bit stronger over time. But the problem actually started here, because in the beginning I wasn't even capable of closing my left eye on its own. I assumed that I just didn't do it often enough, so the muscle was not strong enough to make me close it. So in the beginning I had to kind of find creative methods to block my left eye out in order to train my right eye. Over time, I also practiced blinking with my left eye so that I would be able to have my right eye open on its own. And I can tell you that, practicing blinking in public is not the best idea. So just as a pro tip, if you try to blink, do it at home, don't do it on the street, because this might lead to a couple of misleading situations. So better to just, blink when you're alone. After dry practicing, I also started practicing with my camera, so I started to compose and shoot with my right eye. But what didn't work was to have both eyes open, but to kind of see something, I had to close my left eye, which now was possible, in order to see and compose something. It was still more uncomfortable and more kind of exhausting, but at least I managed to take a couple of shots with my right eye. After weeks of practicing, I noticed the following changes. Firstly, I can close my left eye now without having to use too much force, which I think is already a major step. And secondly, I, managed to take a couple of shots with my right eye while the left eye was closed. And now, starting to have both eyes open, I get to see a little bit of an idea of frame lines every now and then. Not super clear and not usable, but I think, I noticed some changes. But the change that I didn't notice was it didn't change my eye dominance. In fact, this is also in line with what research is suggesting, because it's assumed that eye dominance is very highly genetic, just as it is with the dominance of our hands. So, it's very hard to change from being left-handed to being right-handed and the other way around. I also did some reading in forums about shooting and arching, because in these areas it's also very important what your eye dominance is. Because in arching, for example, it's preferred to have dominance on one side of your body. So if you're right-handed, it's preferred to also have a dominant right eye, because cross dominance can cause some problems later on. So in those forums, I read a couple of cases of people who successfully managed to change their eye dominance. But it seems like it took a couple of years of practice, so it doesn't seem to be impossible, but it surely doesn't seem to be the easy or very common way to do so. So what does it mean for my photography? Well, it means that I am using my Leica wrong, and I will most likely continue to use it wrong. I will actually continue to use my Leica with my left eye, because this is simply the most comfortable, position to use my camera, and also the one that causes the least headaches, even though it means that some of the benefits from the rangefinder system might not be accessible for me that way. However, due to the little self-experiment, I also noticed a couple of things that I actually like and prefer by using the camera the wrong way, and that is mostly that when I put the camera to my left eye, I kind of press my nose against the camera body, which kind of results in more stability in the camera compared to using it that way. So actually using the camera the wrong way helps to reduce camera shake, which was a very fun observation to make. On the downside though, I have to admit that, taking selfies with your camera looks way cooler like this in comparison to this. But I found a great way to compensate for the lack of coolness by using your camera wrong, and that is to simply make your camera look incredibly cool. And I did so by actually using these very cool but also very handy and very practical and high quality leather straps, and these were kindly sent to me by Wotancraft. And Wotancraft is a company that is manufacturing leather camera straps out of one leather strip, which come in the regular kind of split ring version, or as I have it here, in the Peak Design ankle link version, either as a neck strap or as a wrist strap, in a kind of diversity of different leather options. And I have to admit that especially the neck strap has been by far one of my absolute favorite camera straps I have ever used so far. So this was a really kind of cool experience, and I'm very glad that they reached out. So I think you can also use the very cool camera straps if you use the camera the correct way. So no matter how you use the camera, in case you are interested in a pair of cool straps, you should definitely check out Wotancraft. In conclusion, I feel like this topic is not really talked about often enough, even though statistically 30% of people are left eye dominant, which means that more people than only me should have run into the topic at some point. And I feel like the only situations where it was talked about was when some sort of Leica snobs approached me to let me know that I'm using my camera wrong, which kind of puts a shameful connotation to this usage of the camera, which it simply shouldn't be. So with this video, I also wanted to kind of show that it's okay to use your camera the wrong way. Further, I don't see this experiment as finished yet, but I will definitely continue to practice my right eye and see where this will leave me in maybe half a year or maybe a year, and see if this will change my shooting style in any way. But for now, I decided to simply embrace that I'm using my camera the wrong way, because it simply is what it is. And to be fair, I also had the thought if this will really kind of change something, because for now I feel very comfortable with my framing and with my composition, even though I do it with the left eye. And I also kind of doubt if anybody who will only look at the images can recognize which eye it was framed and composed with. So I think this is also a thought to take into account. But of course, I would also be interested to hear from you. So, are you using your camera correctly?